Good evening and welcome to the show. We begin today's episode with a discussion around Antifa's call to remove Biden. Then we jump into his policies in day one at the office, trying to destroy the legacy of President Trump. Then I have a deep analysis into why the Paris Climate Agreement will fail the American people and what it means. Our first topic today starts with Antifa rioting again in multiple places across the nation. On Wednesday, rioters in Portland and Seattle vandalized a Democratic Party office. Some even held a sign saying, "We don't want Biden, we want revenge for police murders, imperialist wars, and fascist massacres." While Biden urged unity in his speech, he also subtly hinted at going after white supremacy and domestic terrorism, without mentioning BLM or Antifa protests. So far, we thought Antifa loved Biden and the Democrats because they never denounced it. However, the formation of a totalitarian state is just about to be complete in America, as the most powerful public and private sector actors unify behind the idea that actions to stamp out dissent can be justified. Are we there now? Well, Antifa will continue to do whatever they want, and Biden won't discredit or even call them out. While many warned about the rise of fascism or socialism in the land of the free, the ideas have largely been vague or fragmented, focusing on individual events or actors. Recent events, however, indicate that seemingly unconnected pieces of oppression puzzles are fitting together. The effects can be seen throughout the society. Americans, regardless of their income, demographics, or social stature, are being fired from jobs, getting stripped of access to basic services such as banking and social media, or having their businesses crippled for voicing political opinions and belonging to a designated political underclass. Access to sources of information unsanctioned by the regime is becoming increasingly difficult. Some figures of power and influence are sketching the next step, labeling large segments of society as extremists and potentially terrorists, who needs to be deprogrammed, while the real terrorist groups like Antifa roam the streets and destroy properties. They're like the Red Guards during the Mao Zedong's Cultural Revolution era. Totalitarian regimes are commonly understood as constituting a government headed by a dictator that regulates the economy, censors the media, and quells dissent by force. That is not the case in America. But it's also a misunderstanding of how such regimes function, based on literatures on totalitarianism. However, maybe because we were fooled by the books, always directing us to look elsewhere for a dictatorship. Because the elements that holds totalitarianism together as a composite of intellectual elements is the ambition of fundamentally reimagining society, to make something new, because apparently the old ways don't work anymore. This, you see it at the roots of progressivism, always changing the foundation and the fundamentals. The word evolution, now if you think about it, changing the word revolution is about changing your destiny. If you think about that, it means recreating destiny given by God. What was made for you is now changed. Is that the right thing to do? The word revolution, if you think about it, it means recreating the destiny given by God. What was made for you is changed. But is that the right thing to do? Based on various ideologies, the word revolution means different things. For example, Karl Marx, who co-authored the Communist Manifesto, viewed the control of the economy as primary, describing socialism as socialized man, the associated producers rationally regulating their interchange with nature, bringing it under their common control instead of being ruled by it as by the blind forces of nature. Adolf Hitler, leader of the National Socialist Workers' Party in Nazi Germany, viewed race as primary. People would become socialized, that is, transformed and perfected by removing Jews and other supposedly lesser races from society, as he claims. The most dominant among the current ideologies stems from the so-called critical race or critical race theories, where the perfected society is defined by equity, meaning elimination of differences in outcomes for people in demographics categories deemed historically marginalized. The goal is to be achieved by eliminating the ever-present white supremacy. However, the ideologies currently defines it as. They aim to transform you into a new man or a new woman. While such ideologies commonly prescribe as collectivism, calling for national or even international unification behind their agenda, they are elitist and dictatorial in practice, as they find mankind never woke enough to follow their agenda voluntarily. In Marx's words, the revolution was supposed to occur spontaneously, yet it never did. leading to Vladimir Lenin, the first head of the Soviet Union, to conclude that the revolution will need leadership after all, somebody to think for them. But the underlying element is that this group, called the leadership, who seems to always be smarter, brighter, and more knowledgeable than you will ever be, they somehow always sit on top. But what do these groups do? They get violent if you don't listen to them. They denounce violence too, but only as it is unfavorable to them. Elements of this intellectual foundation can be found in ideologies of many current political forces, from neo-Nazis to Antifa. What would be the alternative then? If calls for radically reorganizing the world are inherently totalitarian, how is the world to avoid them? That's the question. If totalitarianism inherently requires allegiance to its ideology, it can't exist in a society with a lack of such allegiance. The United States were founded on the idea that individual rights and God-given rights are undeniable and unalienable. The idea, rooted in traditional beliefs that human morality is of divine origin, stands a bulwark against any attempt to assail people's right, even for their own good. I think that concept is that whether or not one believes in God, or if he exists or not, is not the point. It's the fact that recognizing that others have the freedom to believe in God. That is what is being trampled upon, and that's what those groups are trying to take away from us. Our second topic today is on the Biden's Day One policies. President Biden made a drastic switcheroo on policies by signing 17 executive orders on Day One, basically halting some of the President Trump's later policies. As I was mentioning yesterday, the international stance against China is likely not going to change for a while, but Biden is making it clear that he will reverse steer the country back into the Obama era. Progressive agendas were the central focus of the Obama administration. It was backed by the overwhelming media coverage, not of the agendas, but of his supposed achievements. This, in 8 years at the White House, allowed the progressive groups, international agreements, big governments, and so much more to come to light. Biden was behind Obama the whole time. On his first day in office, he took a total of 17 executive orders and actions, including a mandate on masks and having the United States rejoin the Paris Climate Accord. He also launched a 100 days mask challenge to compel all Americans to wear masks for the first 100 days in his administration. This was an effort to apparently prevent the spread of the CCP virus. Well, I should also explain why I keep calling it the CCP virus. I really believe that it was the Chinese regime who mismanaged, but more importantly, knowingly hid information regarding the spread of the virus and its severity from the international community, thus leading to a global pandemic that is now being politicized. All right, back to the topic. Biden is also creating a COVID-19 response coordinator position to fill the role former Vice President Mike Pence played in the Trump administration's coronavirus task force, and will re-embed his COVID-19 pandemic response team within the National Security Council. He's also calling on Congress to pass extensions for COVID-19 aid, extend evictions and foreclosure moratoriums, and pause payments for federal loans, including student loans. Biden took a few actions over policies to address climate change, including signing a document that allows the United States to rejoin the Paris Climate Accord within the 30 days. Biden released a statement late Monday. He's also having the United States rejoin the United Nations, World Health Organization, reversing another key Trump decision for the country to leave the WHO after criticisms over the body's handling of the CCP virus breakouts. A number of actions to promote equality of outcome according to an individual's social identity were also signed on January 20th, including an executive order that Biden's team said would advance racial equity and an executive order to disband the Trump administration's 1776 commission that sought to promote the national unity through education about America's founding principles over historical revisionism. With more discrimination, that is what apparently they're calling it. Now, this was only one day after the report from the commission come out. With that, too, Biden also signed an executive order that directs the government to interpret the Civil Rights Act as one that prohibits workplace discrimination, including on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity. So far, we've seen a full display of progressive agendas in just a single day. Now, if you ever missed the Obama era, here we go again. Biden also included these: a memo that directs the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Justice to fortify the DACA program, and also an executive action to remove President Trump's decision to not include illegal immigrants in the census. He also pushed out a memorandum to further extend temporary protected status and working authorization to Liberians granted refuge in America before 2007. Even though I said Biden will keep some of Trump's international policies, in particular with China, he will take no time to reverse all of Trump's legacies. So you see that Trump has fought against the swamp for 4 years. All it takes is just one day for a lot of it to crumble down once they are back up. Biden also signed an executive order that seeks to reverse Trump's immigration enforcement and reset the policy and practices to align with Biden's administration's values and priorities. Part of the order involves revoking Trump's Executive Order 13768, which was signed in 2017, withheld the federal funding from so-called sanctuary cities that do not cooperate with federal immigration authorities. Now, he signed a separate proclamation to pause the building of the U.S.-Mexico border wall and determines how to divert funds previously assigned to the effort. He did not mention if he would take down the existing walls. Finally, Biden signed 2 other separate executive orders. One addresses new ethics commitments for executive branch appointees aimed at maintaining public trust in government. The second is focused on reviewing executive branch regulatory actions in a way that ensures the promotion of the administration's values informed by public engagement with relevant stakeholders. However, the problem I see with all of these executive orders is that if one requires a hike in tax for the economics policies, the other one is economic achievements of Trump will be erased in the near future. There's also the thing with executive orders such as the ones for ethic commitments. I think those are for jokes. I think maintaining public trust and commitment doesn't come from Biden's mouth. It comes from the actions. So far, these actions only show that he wants to fulfill a progressive agenda and pretty much ignore how to actually run the country. I think many people woke up after Obama's era that the country has really fallen into chaos. And yet Biden wants to continue many of Obama's failed policies right after seeing Trump's success. Before we go on, if you enjoy the content, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like the video. We have actually been demonetized by YouTube, which means we can no longer place ads on the videos. Such as now, if you want to support us, we do have a donation link in the description box below. President Trump first announced in 2017 his intention to withdraw the Paris Climate Accord, calling the United Nations framework to tackle climate change a total disaster for the US economy. And it was too lenient towards communist China and its greenhouse gas emissions. Trump says in 2017, the Paris Accord is simply the latest example of Washington entering into an agreement that disadvantages the United States to the exclusive benefit of other countries, leaving American workers who they love and taxpayers to absorb the cost of terms of losing jobs and lower wages, as well as shuttering factories and vastly diminished economic production. The United States formally left the climate agreement on November 4th of 2020, but Biden on November 5th vowed that he would rejoin the Paris Accord once he came into office. Former President Barack Obama had the United States join the accord during the final months of his administration in 2016. At the time, he said that he fought against climate change is not the one that any country, or no matter how powerful, can do alone. Now let's talk about why the Paris Climate Agreement is so bad for the country. First of all, let me show you who benefits from it. Rep. Hasselberger has this right about the summary of the Paris Climate Accord. Now, this really only scores international points rather than real benefits. According to Reuters, a list of 75 executives expressed their support for the Paris deals, said they employed or plan to employ more than 2 million US workers, while the union leaders represented 12.5 million workers by sometimes around 2030. That sounds great, but guess who, according to the list of these supporters, actually enjoy the idea? It's all the big industry leaders. The idea is that by switching to green energy, eliminating greenhouse gases numbers, it helps to create jobs in renewable energy industries. Again, this all sounds great right now, but consider who are the actual working class people in the United States at the moment. That's right, it's oil and gas, it's energy sector of 2020, it's manufacturing. These people in large populations work at oil fields, refineries, production plants. Those are the middle class wage earners. If they switch to renewable energy, it kills the existing oil and gas industry, which is responsible for so much of the United States' growth in the last 4 years as an energy-independent nation. What about the people that will lose jobs as of now? We have 30 years, according to the plan, to actually switch to renewable energy. Who would right off the bat want to kill off a large portion of oil and gas jobs other than Biden? This is made even worse as it was a single-side sacrifice for the US economy for the benefit of China. The Hells reported that the weakness of the Paris Agreement was in that it was lopsided, requiring little from China and a great deal from the US. President Obama committed the United States to reducing carbon emission in 2025 by around 26 to 28%, which would have meant a substantial jump in electricity costs as well. By contrast, China committed to boosting non-fossil fuels to only around 20% of its overall energy mix by 2030. And as one analyst commented in the New York Times, what China is pledging to do here is not a lot different from what China's policies are on track to deliver. Which means the way it works is that when the US joins in, the United Nations, who is basically looking over the Paris Accord, will dictate how, as a global community, deals with climate change issues. It eliminates any say that the US has as an independent nation. So for a long time, there is a one-sided money feeding into the global agreement, and it basically goes into China. So this agreement just indirectly feeds money into China from the pockets of the US taxpayers, while at the same time destroy the US oil and gas industry altogether. China will never meet their emission expectations. It's not the purpose of the Paris Agreement, because this entire agreement by the UN is a part of a global government, global economic control. It's all what the deep state wanted. Trump on November 22nd criticized the Global Climate Pact in a video statement to the G20 summit, which was hosted by Saudi Arabia, that the Paris Climate Accord was not designed to save the environment, it was designed to kill the American economy. In this finding, taking into account the loss in employment in other non-manufacturing sectors, the job equivalence impact for the overall industrial sector could be about 1.1 million job loss by 2025 and 6.5 million in 2040. According to a study by the Nearer Economics, meeting the commitments Obama made as part of the Paris Accord could cost the U.S. economically $3 trillion and 6.5 million industrial sector jobs by 2040. The study was commissioned by the American Council for Capital Formation with the support from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Institute for the 21st Century Energy. According to the report, existing regulations fall well short of achieving former President Obama's goal of the 26 to 28% of reduction in the net emission from, I believe, 2005 to 2025. Now, with an 80% reduction by 2040, which is an unachievable goal. As well, according to the Heritage Foundation analysis, that these higher costs would be spread across the entire economy and would shrink the overall economic growth and employment. Heritage Foundation analysts estimated that the regulations required to meet the Obama administration's commitments would impose the following costs by 2035. An overall loss of nearly 400,000 jobs, half of which would be in manufacturing. An average total income loss for more than 20,000 for a family of 4. An aggregate GDP loss of over 2.5 trillion. Now, why would they do it then? Well, the goal of the United Nations, WHO, World Bank, and the World Economic Forum are all just part of forming the big government, big control they're so desperate to have. The end goal is to establish a global one government that manages all of the world's economy and populations in various factors. This is the same as what the communists would do, form the Communist International, which was a global front of communist countries. However, the Western world didn't adopt communism on the front. Therefore, they chose this global government control instead. Do you see how the two aligns now? They want to centralize money and economic power as much as possible, control the wealth, and control how people spend their money. Now, Biden's plan to cancel the Keystone XL pipeline is a gift to other than the oil countries. Also, who are really the groups that oppose the oil since its inception? I think the biggest beneficiary would be countries like Venezuela and Russia, maybe even Saudi and China. Certainly Canada and the US don't benefit from it. Keystone XL President Richard Pryor said over 1,000 jobs will be eliminated in the coming weeks. As well, according to the Association of Oil Pipelines CEO Andy Black, the move is tantamount to killing 10,000 jobs and taking $2.2 billion in payroll out of workers' pockets, and is not what the Americans need or want right now. Alberta, the province where the Keystone Pipeline mainly runs through, it's also the Canadian province with the biggest oil production. Their Premier Jason Kenney said in a statement Sunday that he is deeply concerned by the reports that the incoming administration will cancel permits for the project's construction in the U.S. Doing so would kill jobs on both sides of the border, weakening the critically important Canada-U.S. relationships and undermine U.S. national security by making the United States more dependent on OPEC oil imports in the future. Let me fill you in on some information with Alberta. Since 2008, the economic crash, Alberta hasn't been able to recover from the after effects. Alberta is an oil province. Its production is directly transported to many refineries here in the U.S. Texas and Alberta work quite closely together in the oil industry. Many of the headquarters are in Alberta. Doing so, killing the pipeline, is a blow to the knee for both Texas and Alberta. Before we go, YouTube has decided to demonetize our channel, which means we will no longer have advertisements on the channel for our videos and cannot receive donations via the super chat. YouTube says we must change our content to reapply for monetization. Therefore, we would appreciate any support via our donation link in the description below. We will continue to work hard to provide you good content. In any case we disappear from YouTube, you can find us at the following places. We also upload videos to Rumble and YouMaker. We also have an email newsletter link to sign up to stay updated on the channel. To stay connected, follow our social media page on Twitter and Parler once it comes back. We're also on Telegram. Thanks for your continued support of Beyond the Noise. Have a good night.